Hi, my name is Jonathan McHugh. Thank you guys so much. Anybody who's got a chance to see Long Live Rock. If not, you have another 24 hours to see it during the first annual Guild of Music Supervisor / Mondo.NYC Film Fest. And we're going to kick off a little Q&A about the movie with my old friend, Rob Steinberg. Rob and I went to college together, representing WTUL right there. Boom, that's how we started in the business. We got into college radio, realized we could make a living in entertainment. We never turned back. Then Rob, when he got out of school, started working for this company called Lieber Krebs, which had managed a band called the Scorpions and a bunch of other big hard rock bands. They were one of the kings of the hard rock management scene back in the day. Rob went on the road with the Scorpions and took me to my first metal show in 10 years probably. I mean, I grew up going to stuff like Black Sabbath and Madison Square Garden and Kiss and stuff like that, but I hadn't been, as our college experience was more about the Grateful Dead and the Radiators and the Meters and all these great New Orleans funk bands. So Rob did that for a number of years, then had a really bad car accident, almost died, dead, and then woke up and decided he wanted to be an actor. And that ruined his life right there. He didn't die, but he lived and he became an actor. But he got a lot of big roles. I mean, he was in Die Hard 2. He's been in a ton of stuff over the years. More recently, he was the actual guy that freed the slave after 3.5 hours of that movie in 12 Years a Slave, which won a little thing called an Oscar. There he is. Is that you? And it's you and the slave?
Well, me and Chiwetel, yeah.
Chiwetel became a big star off that movie.
Well, he's a talented actor, really talented.
Yeah, he did well. So, but anyway, Rob and I have known each other for a long time. I showed him the movie. He loved it because it reminded him back of his youthful days. And he's come aboard as an executive producer and helping out on the cause. Rob is obviously a great actor, but he's also a host, and he's has a really, really cool podcast called Festival. What is it? Festival Creative? What is it?
Festival Circuit New Orleans.
Circuit New Orleans. Osiris Media produced it. It's up on all the places you can find podcasts like Apple and things like that. So great voiceover guy. Great podcast all about the history of New Orleans Jazz Fest. Anyway, Rob, so that's Rob. And then you can tell me about me now, Rob.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to do a couple things. So, John and I have been friends for a long time. We've shared our love of music. We've seen thousands of bands and concerts together. And John is an independent filmmaker as well as a TV and film music supervisor. He's held high-ranking positions at New Line Cinema, Warner Brothers, Sony Records, Universal over the past few decades. That's how long we've been doing this, huh?
Hell yeah.
Yep. He just finished directing his first 2 films. The one hopefully that you saw tonight or will see before tomorrow night called Long Live Rock, Celebrate the Chaos. And his first, and also it's playing right here at the GMS Mondo, New York City, first annual film festival, as well as Cosplay Universe. And John's produced over 30 films and TV shows, and music supervised over 75 films and TV series with some of music's biggest stars, including Janis Joplin's highly regarded documentary, Lionsgate's Snoop Dogg's Hood of Horror, Repo, the generic opera with Sarah Brightman, Lifetime's Flying By, Billy Ray Cyrus, and Discovery's TV's Battleground Earth with the unforgettable Motley Crue Tommy Lee and Ludacris.
You must have spent some time with Tommy Lee in your day, huh?
Yeah. Someone's at my door, which is ridiculous. So it's probably somebody looking for a vote. I'm going to vote, but I'm not going to go answer the door right now. And he's currently producing Muhammad Ali's documentary called City of Ali. So let me give you a little background on this film. Either you've just seen it or you hopefully will see it, but it's called Long Live Rock, Celebrate the Chaos, and it follows some super passionate rock fans as they drop everything to commune with their rock family at America's top festivals while they celebrate the chaos. And that is rock and roll chaos, of course. So get a front row seat and see what makes hard rock fans want to crowd surf, mix it up in a mosh pit, or even participate in the oh-so-crazy Wall of Death. Not a place for us old guys, necessarily. It features interviews and live performances with different bands and members of Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Slipknot, Korn, Avenged Sevenfold, Rob Zombie, Five Finger Death Punch, Prophets of Rage, Greta Van Fleet, Halestorm, and many more. Long Live Rock also explores the inescapable dark side of this chosen lifestyle, chronicling such delicate topics as substance abuse, depression, loss of life, and the unspoken truths that are unfortunately too commonplace in the rock and roll world. Welcome, John McHugh.
Thank you, Robert.
So, yeah, I mean, I got a chance to see this movie. I really liked it. It definitely reminded me of some of the flashbacks to the old days. But what was really incredible, I thought, was also the generational, how many generations hard rock actually spans. Because when I was in it back in the 80s, it was really just kind of one generation of 20-something, late teens and 20-somethings. But now, 40 years later, you have two more generations of fans that also show up at these events. So just tell me, like, what inspired you to want to make this movie?
Well, in growing up as a teenager in New York City, going to shows, Madison Square Garden, sneaking into like Black Sabbath or Kiss at the Nassau Coliseum was my first concert ever. And Led Zeppelin was my first concert ever, and Kiss was my second. But this was the only music for us. That was it. There was other forms of music. There was pop music and stuff, but hip hop was not even just about getting going. Hadn't quite gotten out of the Bronx yet. But we kind of grew up in that world, and that it was a rock world, and that was the thing. So as we went to college, and then my world expanded, meeting people like you and getting involved with the radio station. And, there was so many different alternative music started, and, the New Orleans funk music and the Grateful Dead culture, all that stuff collided on top of me. And so I moved away from that kind of music. When I got out of school and started working in the film business and record business, it just wasn't something I gravitated to. It was, there was just so many different kinds of music to enjoy and like. And never stopped liking Sabbath and Led Zeppelin and some bands like that, but the heavier stuff kind of escaped me. I was always fascinated, though, by the passion of the fan and how they just went all in. And then obviously the stuff like crowd surfing, moshing, stage diving when they could do it in the smaller venues.
Let me jump to that question too, because one of my favorite parts of this movie was the discussion of the mosh pit and the wall of death. I mean, listen, I was in this business myself for 10 years and been a fan of it for a long time. And I've witnessed mosh pits and I've witnessed the wall of death. And I never truly understood it until I saw this film. I mean, as much as I was around it and exposed to it, it wasn't explained in a way that I really got it. So, what did you find out? What did you learn about the mosh pit?
Well, much like, I guess I'm fascinated by subcultures, because the cosplay universe thing is the same thing. Like, these are a bunch of freaks that parade around a conference, and dress up. And it's like, no, there's so much more depth to it. Same thing with this thing. People get that perception, like these bearded, tattooed, beer drinking freaks. They're off in their field just banging their head, right? That gets this crazy bad stigma. And then when you get into meet these people, and they're just like these hardworking, normal, mid-American people for a lot of stuff we shot. And they use this music as therapy. And it really helps them work out some of their stuff and their kinks. And they just are, and it's also a really, one of my favorite parts was the adolescent psychologist we interviewed, based on the study in Australia, how kids, these outcasts who like this music, would be bullied. And then they would find their crew, and their crew would be together and bond. And then all of a sudden the bullies became scared of this crew, right? Because of the way they looked.
And they took care of each other too.
And they looked out for each other, and it became a community. And that's what this movie is about. It's about community. So the aspect of crowd surfing, I mean, it's like a crazy high. Like, I don't have the balls to do it anymore, but I kind of wish I did back then, because when you see these people come off this ride from the back of the crowd to the front and get to look in the band's eyes, and they give them James Hetfield from Metallica gives My Girl a thumbs up. It's incredibly the rush that these people have, and being there, watching it, filming it, and then seeing what happens. One of my other favorite parts of the film is security. Let
me ask that question, because that was really fascinating. I mean, despite having worked for monstrous concert events and stadiums and venues, one of the things I just sort of was never really sure of or witnessed was the level of when they're crowd surfing and they get passed all the way to the front. sometimes I think we've seen that, in the early days, security was not happy to have them there. It was a lot of work for them, and it was a pain in the ass. So they could be a little bit rough at times. But what I witnessed in this film was sort of this understanding that the world of rock has come to with the crowd surfing and with the mosh pits, that when someone gets passed to the front, these security guys are really taking care of them. They're gently bringing them over and then bringing them back into the crowd. Whereas it used to be, if you crowd surfed and you made it over that wall, you were out. Right. So now there's a better understanding, and you have interviews with security people in here, and how did you
Yeah, so I got to the festival, and the one we shot at, this festival in Columbus, which is now called Sonic Temple, is probably the biggest crowd festival, surfing festival in America. It's like it's still against the law. You're not allowed to do it theoretically. You can get thrown out of the building, and if they see you do it more than 2 or 3 times, they will basically try to kick you out. So it's kind of like you get a couple free passes. But anyway, in talking to the head of security, I realized that, he said it's like a science. We hire, like anything else, we hire football teams, offensive line, defensive lines, guys that have worked together on the lines and these games and practices that understand how to work together. Because as you can see, it's a system. One guy holds the other guy up. As the other guy catches, the other guy knocks the feet out so they don't get kicked in the head, because that can hurt. And as Noodles from Offspring said, it's like these are the guys that take you off the ride at Disneyland, right? Which I thought was a tremendous analogy, because you just whipped around on whatever ride you're on at Disneyland. You're all like, and the people that pull you out of the cart, these are those people. Security are those people. So, and like you said, you had a really good point. I remember growing up, total adversarial relationship from security. You were either trying to sneak into better seats, or smoking weed, or doing something wrong, or sneaking in some alcohol, whatever it was. And you were like always looking out for the man, right? Here, it's like these people have this relationship with security. And one of the African-American security guards is like, yeah, the girl in the wheelchair, man, I see her all the time. Like, I'm always looking out for her. And that's the poster shot where, Abby's looking over the crowd screaming as he carries her out,
Now, so when you started doing this, did you think you were going to have this little segment on the security guys and the football players?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't answer the question. I'm sorry, I rambled. Basically, when I got there, I watched this thing going on. And I said to my producer, Gary Spivak, who's the guy who hosted us at all his festivals for Danny Wimmer Productions. Shout out to Danny. Thank you for hosting us. I was like, well, who are these people? Like, how do they do this? And he's like, well, you got to talk to him. So I interviewed him and his crew. And he's like, yeah, this guy's the football coach for the local college. And he brings his guys in, and every year we hire them. And whatever city I go to, I look to hire the local football teams, right, college teams. And I was like, wow. So that's what the movie is interesting thing when you do a doc. You don't see these things coming, and sometimes they become the best stuff in the movie,
Yeah, and there's an advantage to it being, younger a football team too, because they listen to their coach, right? They're not independently angry and trying to sort of hassle anybody, but they're really gentle and they take care, which is really fascinating.
Representatives of the festival, right? So they can't be, like I said, they don't want to have that adversarial relationship, and it gets pretty brutal down there. I mean, it's hot and sweaty, and people are pushing and shoving, and boots are flying everywhere, and people are throwing stuff over the rail. I mean, the energy is incredible up front of a concert, and the mosh pits and things like that. It's a deep energy.
So you got a lot of big acts in here, I mean, I was kind of surprised, you've got Rob Zombie, you've got Lars from Metallica, Ice-T's interviewed, I mean, Dr. Drew, I mean, there's so many, I mean, Korn and all of these really amazing bands are well represented both in interviews and in music. So how did you find the guys that you wanted to be in this festival?
All Gary Spivak. Like the germination of the movie was Gary has works for one of these biggest hard rock festivals in the company in America that books these festivals. And I had said, dude, I think we should do a movie someday about the culture and what it is. And he's like, I don't know how we do that. And then all of a sudden he's like, dude, I just booked Metallica for our 10th anniversary of our show in Columbus. Let's figure it out. So I called my cinematographer, Jordan Renner. We had just been working on the cosplay movie together. And I said, dude, you like hard rock? And I start saying some of the names they're playing. He's like, Gojira, that's my favorite band. So I was like, all right, I'm going to buy a ticket for you. We'll go to Columbus. We'll shoot. Gary will put us up. He'll feed us. We'll pick up some local crew and we'll just shoot. And we'll do a sizzle reel. We'll get some interviews and and that's what we did. We got a sizzle reel together, edited together, and then we went out and found money and raised money, and we got a distributor off that sizzle reel. And then, of course, they went bankrupt, but that's another story.
Right.
But we did it. We built it, and it just kept growing. And then we'd send the sizzle around to other managers that were skeptical, and they're like, "Wow, this looks great. We'll do it at the next festival." So we did like 4 different festivals over a 2-year period, and obviously it's not a full-time thing while you're doing other stuff. But we got a tremendous, we got everybody we need in the business. Everybody from Ice-T to Lars, and then obviously we didn't plan. One of my favorite interviews that never happened was going to be with Chris Cornell, because I had worked with Chris. I put him in the movie when he was Soundgarden, Basketball Diaries, years ago, and I hadn't seen him in years, and I was excited. And then literally the night before we were going to interview him, he died. And we showed up the next morning, and there on the dressing room was the Soundgarden sign. Right. And that's how eerie it was. So they had to scramble when we watched them scramble and to figure out what to do when your headliner dies the night before.
Yeah.
And the band was literally in Columbus. Chris had stayed in Detroit, but the band had already gotten to Columbus. So I was like, Gary, we got to shoot this stuff. He said, we can't do it. We can't deal with it. It's, we don't want to feel like we're taking advantage of something. So
that's the story, right? I mean, when you're in that moment and there's something that big that happens, you're sort of torn between whether or not you take advantage of it or you explain it. And I think that it was really well explained, especially with the information about, drugs and alcohol.
And so what happened is, so we weren't going to focus on drugs and alcohol on. It's supposed to be an upbeat, happy movie, right? Then all of a sudden, we like, all right, we have the foot. Oh, by the way, so we interviewed everybody that came in about Chris Cornell first question, because what's on their mind? They don't really want to talk about how fun the game is. They're thinking about Chris Cornell. And so everybody was interviewed. We just did it, didn't use it at all. Then all of a sudden, Chester Bennington dies, like 8 months later, whatever it was. And I was like, okay, Gary, we got to talk about this. And so that's when that segment started to happen.
Right.
And so that, again, that was not another thing that was supposed to be in the movie. It just kind of happened.
So how do you decide which bands are going to be in the movie? I mean, when you're doing this, does it sort of happen? I mean, for anyone who's out trying to make documentaries or looking into this, can you really plan in advance, or do you sort of sometimes have to wing it?
I'll give you an example. Another one of my favorite things is the crowd surfing couple. This crazy woman, Michelle, who's just a pit bull of energy. She's like, I found her in a surfing in a crowd in some of my footage.
Right.
And I was like, we didn't film her at all. And I was like, who is this woman? And one of our fans said, oh, that's Michelle. She loves to crowd surf on top of her husband. I was like, wait, that's a thing? She's like, yeah, she stands on her husband, and her husband, they push him from the back to the front.
Like a surfboard. He's like a surfboard, and she's riding him.
Like, wait a second. This is like getting that much better. So I found her. I got her on the phone. It turned out she was from New Orleans, and they met in New Orleans. They met in a bar in New Orleans. They got married. So we started talking New Orleans. And then I was like, look, I'd really love to film you if you're going to go to this next festival. She's like, I'll tell you what, I'll let you film me, but there's something I want. She starts negotiating with me. And I said, what's that? She goes, I want to have a hamster ball fight with my husband during Godsmack's song, Crying Like a Bitch. And I was like, whoa, that's a very specific ask.
Very specific.
So I called Gary. I was like, Gary, I know like the hamster ball thing is not viewed. You can't really bring that stuff into the
What venue. Is hamster ball?
That's the scene at the end of the movie where they get in these plastic 6-foot balls.
Those blow up balls that are inflated with air. And you can find, right?
And I said, Gary, I need to smuggle 2 of these things in, and I need to launch them like at the front. And he's like, oh man, that security's never going to go for that. But luckily we'd already interviewed security at the last festival. So we built this relationship up with them. Right. And I said, hey, we just need to turn you back for this 1 minute. They launch, and then they get down, and they come down, and they're done. So I was like, okay, that I need to shoot the shit up. So we need to have 6 cameras on that. Like we need to have 2 GoPros, 1 on each of them. a camera on stage, a camera in the crowd, and then camera on the rails, one in the front, one on the T in the middle. And it turned out to be unbelievable, you know? But even before that, we shot another round of her. She said, oh, I'm sorry. That was her second ask, my bad. The first ask was, I want to crowd surf on top of my husband to Five Finger Death Punch song. So that's what we had 5 cameras on each of those 2 things over 2 different festivals. So she became, much like Abby in the wheelchair, they became, and they weren't even my first people at all. Like I had these, you know, all the other people were really good in the movie, Jesse and G and Scott, all these people were great. But all of a sudden you get these people elevating the game. You're like, put the camera on those people, you know, and that's how that happened.
So tell me a little bit about this woman in the wheelchair who lost her leg, because it's a fascinating story. She's the cover of the film. She's the poster, and she's in throughout, and she's very sweet and very compelling, and maybe not something you'd necessarily expect either. But how did you find her?
It was basically one of the other fans said, you know, I saw a picture of her in a wheelchair from another festival. And I was like, who's this girl? And she's like, that's Abby. She's lost her leg in a motorcycle accident. And I was like, okay, I'd love to meet her. So she lives in a trailer in Tennessee with her 2 little girls. And she just had so much spirit and energy that she was inspirational for people who have disabilities. Yeah. And not that crowd surfing is something that you want to aspire to be or do, but she's fearless. And, you know, having that level of disability and just going for it was amazing. And then she tells me the story, how she lost her leg.
Well, her leg came off during one of these crowd surfing moments. And then she gets moved across the crowd over the barrier into security, but she's there without her leg. And it was a little while before she got it back, right?
Yeah, and you can't write this stuff, right? But I had to find an animator to go, okay, here's the scenario. I need you to animate this, and she'll narrate it. And it came out really good. And then at the end, I don't want to tell you what happens because it's a great reveal, but it's hilarious, you know? So these people are just like the salt of the earth, you know, Southern Midwestern people who just love to rock. And growing up as a teenager in New York City, loving to rock, I totally get it. And you know, you've seen how many Scorpion shows you figure you've been to in your life?
You know, I don't know. I did probably 5 years with them, probably a couple of 100 shows at least, you know. And I got to say, it was crazy because, you know, even when I first got involved with them, I didn't really know their music. I was not really a hard rock fan. And, you know, I'm reading the lyrics like, the bitch is hungry, she needs to tell, so give her inches and feed her well. I'm like, and that was a top 40 hit. Right. So, I mean, this was not my world. I mean, I'm a Jewish kid working for, you know, Germans wearing leather. It was a little scary at first, but ultimately they were wonderful to work with.
Hey, you're still friends, right?
We're still friends. Yeah. I'm, you know, you got to watch, you got to listen to the Wind of Change podcast.
Tell me about that podcast.
So wonderful.
Wind of Change podcast. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. So I asked Klaus about that, and he, of course, said, yeah, it's an interesting podcast, very entertaining. But yeah, that world of rock was. Have you ever crowd surfed? Have you ever done that?
No. I mean, the closest I came was, you know, Rage Against the Machine is one of my favorite all-time acts, and I was at the edge of a mosh pit out in the 909 in Riverside at a Rage show, and I was stood at the edge, and I was like thinking about going in. I just was like,
no. What would my wife say? Right? That would
be you know, well, broken nose, not a good look to go to a concert.
No, and I've been with you at many concerts, and we've moved through crowds faster than anyone else. Yeah. But I don't know what you call that. I think that's just networking.
I think we call us concert professionals, basically, at this point.
So 2 other questions, I guess. I mean, I'm not sure how long we have, or if we could even open it up to anyone else out there. But what would you say your favorite part of the movie is, or have we already touched on that?
I mean, like I said, it's really an interesting thing when you look at all the different things we shot. I love just the touching nature of the fans, and you know, a character like Gilkey. Like, here's a guy who was just a fuck up and started doing drugs and went to jail for a number of years, and then he meets Scott, who's a correction officer, and the only real thing in this guy's life is being able to listen to music, and they have shitty radio in jail. You can't listen to stuff. And Scott would like smuggle him CDs and a CD player because they both had this bond of this music. And then when Gilkey gets out, he sees him at a concert, and Scott's like, I'm not going to know, like, you know, you don't really want to hang out with people that were in prison, especially a correction officer. And like, he said, look, I want to buy you a beer because you were just so good to me in jail. And I really, you know, that was like, you treated me like a human being because they had this common bond of music.
Right.
And that's what I love about this music. Like, if you're in, and it's a culture and it's a scene. And
it's the same as the bond of the fans of Grateful Dead or the fans of Fish. I mean, there's an element that is just like family, and you see these people at concerts and you make plans to go and be with them at these various concerts. And, you know, it really becomes, you know, an amazing thing that you I think as a typical watcher or a typical fan, you may not necessarily know that this exists like this, but it was really very touching. Two other things, I guess. Talk about, there were a couple of interesting bands in the piece. Who's the woman with the tattoo on her head and the blonde hair?
Maria Brink. So she's interesting in the respect that, you know, she is a very goth-ish figure. And what's really interesting is, you know, my wife, Karen, we were at one of these festivals and she was like, oh my God, you got to see this band in this moment. I was like, who's that band? And she's like, this fronted by this female woman. She's incredibly theatrical. It's like going to a crazy like vaudeville hard rock show. And I was like, all right, I'll go check her out. And I was like, oh my God, she's great. And it turned out that Abby, our wheelchair crowd surfer, you know, has tattooed the name of her song on her
arms. Yeah.
Her arms. And like when she goes up, what was really interesting, like I mentioned, like how Michelle was talking about, she wanted to do this hamster ball fight or this crowd surf during this band's song. Like, that's the shit that gets them. Like, people have a wedding song, right? They walk down the aisle to a song. These people will like crowd surf to a song, right? Because that hypes them up the best. And so to hear Abby talking about being a super fan and getting Maria Brink's dunce cap handed to her at the show after, you know, when she's sitting on stage waiting for her leg to show up, it's just like, you can't write this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that was great. That was a really great moment. I mean, I guess maybe out there watching are going to be some friends and some fans of the music and some people who are also.
Shout out to actually Anna and Sean from the band Satellite City are on. Are you guys there? I want you to say hi. These kids are amazing. They're, you know, the husband and wife rock and roll team. She's a female chick drummer who's super badass. And I met them in LA and I needed some extra music. And they came on board and delivered a couple tracks for us in the movie and have the end title song called Black Magic. You guys there?
What's up, y'all?
What's up, buddy?
Hey.
There they are. So you know, because again, you got a couple old people talking. I'd like to throw it back to you. Like, you guys met through this music, I'm assuming, right? And what is it that drew you together, and why is this music so much of a lifestyle in a way?
I mean, I think growing up, you know, being Armenian Americans, it's pretty uncommon for us to grow up listening to hard rock. So we were kind of the black sheep. You know, we had System of a Down. That was helpful. That was
a good lead in right there.
Definitely. But when we met each other, we realized we had this connection, and we realized we were songwriters in our own right. And we tried to, you know, get some influence from each side. You know, Anna has her own influences, I have my own, and we kind of put it together and formed a band. And yeah, man, we're honored to be in this film with amongst Metallica, Avenged, Halestorm, you know, some of our favorites that we grew up listening to.
Hopefully you guys will be as big as them one day. And what about you, like, as far as being a woman in this business? And, you know, I thought one of my another favorite part was like Lizzie Hale's comment, like, oh yeah, I'd be on stage and guy be like, so whose girlfriend are you? You know, meanwhile, she's the star that everybody's there to see. She's got her name on the marquee, but people don't know. And, you know, so talk about that perception of dealing with women in the hard rock space.
I mean, I think it's still like always a shock when people find out I'm drumming in the band too. And it's like, female drummers, singer, like, wow. And I feel like slowly it's starting to become a thing where you'll see more like female musicians in the rock world. And hopefully by the time we're like older, it'll be a norm and it'll just be, you know, like 50-50. But yeah, it's definitely been one of those things where I guess everyone's shocked to see a woman in a band still, or especially a drummer. It's always like pointed out in interviews and stuff like that.
That's the first interview question we always get. How does Anna Drummond sing?
Right. Yeah, the show we shot with Halestorm in San Francisco at the Warfield, and In This Moment, which is where we shot that live In This Moment footage, and Ash from New Year's Day we interviewed there too. Like it was like one of the first female rock tours, you know, of ever. And it was really cool because there were at least 50% women in the audience, which is very rare for rock shows. So hopefully that trend continues and you guys can break down those barriers like those bands have, because it's really important to, you know, the rock scene.
Let me ask I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say definitely. Like I think we're in an era where that can happen, and that's realistic. And over time, I think year after year, you know, we're going to see that in the mainstream rock scene.
Well, I think things are changing in general in the world, and in hopefully a very good way for women as far as acceptance goes, and hopefully less stereotypes, and they can, you know, you all can continue to branch out and do the things that touch you and make you feel powerful, because that's really what we need.
Before the whole Black Lives Matter thing, I was like, look, I want to focus on, you know, everybody from Ice-T, you know, who basically broke down the barriers with Body Count as, you know, an African-American led rock group. And that's what his passion was. And then you get into kids like Radke that are like, you know, these three stoner kids who just love to rock. And, you know, one of the great lines in the movie is like, everybody's like, yeah, dude, I think, why aren't you rapping, dude? You know, like, because we rock, man. And Steven had some great stuff to say from Fever 333 about, you know, about the whole African-American experience growing up Black and, you know, nobody rocking. So it's just really unique. And it's like we talked about, people find their crew, you know, whether it's the Grateful Dead or Fish or this hard rock culture. And I think it's a badass culture. And you guys got to go to a show in Columbus, right? You guys got to go to Sonic Temple, which is probably the best crowd surfing group you'll ever see, right?
That crowd was insane. I can't describe it. Like, it was just a wave of people, you know, that didn't end.
Yeah, it's something you don't see as much in LA. So
LA doesn't have that.
Like this in LA, everybody just folds their hands and stands there.
Yeah, exactly.
But the Midwest, and that's why we shot in, you know, Columbus, Louisville, North Carolina. I think we used some footage from, you know, all these places where rock just really lives. Is just not the coast. And we sometimes forget, being on the coast, what happens in the interior. You know, this music it fuels that passion, you know?
Let me ask a couple other questions if I can. Just, you know, I don't know how long we have or if anybody else wants to ask anything, but so the film is at this film festival, and it'll probably make it to a couple of other of these sort of.
We just got asked to be. We got asked to be in this Gimme Shelter Film Festival in Greece in December, which is basically focusing on hard rock movies.
Are we going to Greece, or is this going to be festing at home?
If it wasn't for this damn COVID thing, we would be figuring it out. I'd never been to Greece. I've always wanted to go. As a history major in school at Tulane, I read all about the Acropolis. Never seen it. So anyway, we have that.
So let me ask a question. So these various film festivals that we hope to get into, and then the idea is what? How to find certain type of distribution? You know, do you look towards HBO or Netflix or any of those?
We're in negotiations with one of the best distributors for this kind of product in the country. And they've, you know, put up movies in the Beatles and Pearl Jam and, you know, a lot of the top people in the game. So that is, and we're basically looking to do some innovative marketing strategies to get the film out. But obviously VOD will be the first wave probably. Because
video on demand.
Yeah, because if you go to a streaming service, it's great, but you'll never see $1 from them once they write you a check. So the idea, like this movie for me, I did a movie years ago called Repo the Genetic Opera with, if you remember Mark Berg, you know Mark Berg from back in the day. He did all the Saw movies, and he was offered to do this movie. The director, Darren Bousman, wanted to do this, which is an off-Broadway play. Repo the Genetic Opera. It's a fantastic, crazy film, but it's like a goth Rocky Horror. And I said to him, look, if you play your cards right, this movie can play like Rocky Horror's played for the last 30 years. You know, it could be that movie if it gets the marketing attention. And that thought was in my head, and thinking about movies like Heavy Metal Parking Lot, which is literally just a dude with a camera at a Judas Priest show at a parking lot. Decline of Western Civilization 2, which is a much bigger level film. But these movies are revered and they play 25 years later and people still revere them. So I was like, look, if we could be in that lane and make a really good film about a culture that's timeless, but yet a moment in time, like think about it, right? The festival world may or may not come back to that level that it was, right? Because there may be protocols, you know, unless we get a killer vaccine. So that moment in time right there, and hopefully I'm wrong, that it is going to come back as strong as ever. But that moment in time right now, even though it's 2 years ago or a year ago, it looks like a piece of history, modern day history, because we can't do that right now.
Right.
So it's a great time to put this movie out because of that thing. People are jonesing to be doing this, to be at a festival, you know, to go see live music in that setting.
And it does sort of, you know, it will, in some ways, it reminds you of being there. It puts you in that moment, especially if you're a fan and you're missing it, much like festing in place does when you're listening to these various festivals at home. I mean, maybe you're by yourself and you're remembering some music that you saw when you were with friends, or maybe you're with a couple of friends and you're listening or watching. But that's sort of the way that it's going to be, at least probably for the next year or so. It's going to be really hard to get 100,000 people in an arena watching music.
Yeah. So it's really sad. I mean, because, you know, our lives are tied up in it. Our work is tied up in it. And, you know, it is the passion for people. And like, it's like the whole country is deflated and the world is deflated. Like the bubble is just, the air has been let out. And now it's like of the bubble. And now the bubble becomes you and your crew. That's it. That's all you can hang with.
So I just had an idea. So since the evolution now of concerts seems to be this drive-in kind of concert venue where the cars are there and then people either get out of the cars and sit at a table, the concept would be a mosh pit. What was that called when the cars would drive around and smash into each other?
Well, that's Derby. What's that called?
Like the
Manus, what's that called?
something Derby.
Daredevil Derby.
No, there was a name when
Demolition Derby.
Demolition Derby. So that's what you have now. You have a Demolition Derby mosh pit while the concert's going on.
Hear each other. So, but you could be in a car and you could mosh each other in a car. Is that what you're going for?
Yeah, but you know, it could be very expensive when you have to repair the cars. It could be an insurance nightmare. But you know, if you get jalopies, it could work out. Everyone's driving in circles and you know trying to smash into each other.
Film that for the sequel. That's the idea for the sequel.
Mosh Pit Demolition Derby, the sequel. Yeah, that'd be great. Should we open it up and see if anybody has any questions, or should we start to? I mean, how does a half hour, 40 minutes?
What about the guy from Chicago who's got the Grateful Dead shirt on? Has he got any questions?
Yeah. What about you, Mike Manus? You got a question? Got a question for John McHugh? And he's gone.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
All right. So I'm just fascinated to see the movie at this point. I have not seen it yet. And I totally agree with the frozen time. We are living on stolen time right now. And I think to document the culture and up and coming bands and the established bands, it's fantastic. And I can't wait to see the film.
And neither can your dog.
When you're doing it,
yeah, well, she wants to see it as well. Yeah, she wants to see it as well. So, no, I'm very excited to see it. And even tuning in for the last 20, 30 minutes here, I feel like it's, just a great lead up to experiencing really a scene that I'm not that familiar with, even though I'm in the Midwest. It's not as much my thing musically, but it'll be beautifully done, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, you and I like spending time at Lollapalooza in Chicago and Grant Park. That's what our shit. We started at the Blues Fest actually 20 years ago, going to Blues Fest at Grant Park, and it evolved into Lollapalooza.
Yeah, that's the truth. That's the truth. But there is so much good music out there, and I can't wait to get back to some semblance of what we had. I'm missing it. We're all missing it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, so I mean, look, I think it's definitely worth a look. That and Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President is up, and Mr. Soul. They're all up right now if you guys want to take a look, if you have time to watch. Yeah, I guess that's really, I just say watch the movie, see what you think. Anybody has a question, now would be the time to pop it up before we head home for dinner.
Giorgio raising his hand, or there he is.
Giorgio's a young filmmaker. Go, Giorgio.
My question for you is, what's the most satisfying thing about directing a film like this?
Wow, that's a great question, Giorgio. I mean, I think that putting it all together is not easy, and trying to figure out the path of how the film weaves. And when you're making a documentary, it's got a bunch of different topics to it. Like all of a sudden you have to dive into, you don't expect it, but you're diving into the opioid addiction segment. And then how long is that supposed to be and where that's going to be? So you take this cork board and cards, index cards, and you basically stick all the different scenes on, 1 act 1, act 2, act 3, and then you basically just try to move them around and how they go together. So it took us the longest time to figure out how to make it work, and what's too long and what's too short, and is it too abrupt? And Rob, came in and had some good notes about, making sure you're clearing, make sure this is clear and that is clear, because for someone outside the beltway, so to speak, who's not like seeing this stuff every day, you need fresh eyes on it. So that's why you have producers and you have, friends who come and give you guidance, and nothing, like on Giorgio, on your film, like you started with a good thing, but like take some outside perspective and look at it differently. And why is the scene not working as well as it could? And can the music be better here? Could you add more B-roll to it, for example? So I think the answer to the question is when you finally make it a cohesive package and a cohesive film, there's always people going to shit on it. There's always people going to, not like it, whatever. And you also have to have, and, this being my first film after all these years of producing music supervisor, doing soundtracks, doing over 100 films, when it's actually yours and you're the one responsible for that vision along with your crew, it's a different feeling. So you'll have that in your life that, people aren't going to like your films and they'll shit on them or they'll hate on them on the internet or whatever. And it's like, you just have to keep going on and, find your passion in it, because it ain't easy on many levels, to get it together. So yeah, that's good. I'm talked out. That's our 45-minute maximum that we hit. So again, try to watch the movie if you can. If not, it should be out in February at a VOD near you, because we ain't going into theaters at this point. Even though we had the possibility to do it, it just seems like such a weird thing to try to send people into theaters. But I've heard AMC has a special. You could rent out a theater, I don't know if this is true, for $99 to bring your crew to see a movie.
It's true. I just did it.
Who's that?
Sydney.
Sydney, where are you? Oh, there you are. So tell me, what was that experience like?
Yeah, so I haven't done it yet, but I just booked it actually last night for my boyfriend's birthday.
And what choice of movies?
So they give you like 40 different movies. Like I picked Jumanji because I know he likes that, but they have horror movies, they have Halloween movies, they have comedies, kids movies. So you pay the $99. They clean the theater before. You get like your snacks and the entire theaters for yourself. So crazy cool. I saw it on TikTok and I was like,
just because it's like, you got to look for experiences in this pandemic. Like I learned to edit, on Premiere a little bit. So you use the pandemic for your experience that you'll never have again.
That sounds like a great time. That really does, for a $99. So I have every party at a movie theater.
Sydney, how big a crew you bringing?
I think just my boyfriend for his birthday. I was going to surprise him.
That's your boyfriend?
Yeah, because he loves movies. So this is like for his birthday. I was going to surprise him.
Deep gesture.
We'll see. Maybe his family, his friends. We'll see.
Right. Gray area. But how many people to bring?
Hey, John, do you want to take a few more questions? Because I need to sign off into my next interview.
Good. 45 minutes is the number we got. So
there we go.
Thank you guys so much for coming. Rob, thank you so much for moderating. You got
Thank you, John.
You got a future. Check out Rob Steinberg, his podcast.
You know what? He's got a future and he's got a past. And that's the beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you guys all for coming, and have a great night.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a great one.